You're listening to the Whole Hog Sports Podcast. And now, here's your host, Matt Jones.
We're talking basketball on the podcast today with Anthony Kristensen. First, a word from Kindle King.
Kindle King, we're proud of over 4 decades of design. We're continuing the legacy of great creative design by combining our brands of Kindle King, Soapbox, and Shopcart. Together, these brands represent a new focus in marketing design with individual attention to specific areas. Through our design expertise supported by a team of talented professionals, we showcase our best. We are Kindle King, we are Soapbox, we are Shopcart, we are design.
Football portal rolling along. You can read about it at wholehogsports.com. Today we're going to talk about Razorback basketball on the show. Anthony Kristensen here in studio with me. And we're going to do something kind of fun today, which is, or at least to start the show. Later in the show, I want to talk to you about your AP Top 25 poll. I want to talk to you about the Ole Miss game tomorrow night. But I want to spend a little bit of time here at the start talking about this year's team and kind of a midseason player analysis. Arkansas's 15 games into the season, basically at the halfway point. I mean, there's 31 regular season games. Obviously, they're going to have more in the postseason. But halftime of the Ole Miss game, that's the midway point of the regular season. So I want to go through all of the players, all of the rotation players, and kind of get your thoughts on them, Anthony. And what we're going to do is I'm going to give you 1 minute on each player because I know you like to get a little long-winded a little bit. I'm going to pull my stopwatch up. By the way, I pulled my phone out to set my stopwatch, and I don't know if this ever happens to anybody else, but my stopwatch was going, and it says that it has been going for 4,175 hours, 7 minutes, and 13.3 seconds. So we had to first stop it, and then we had to figure out what the heck, when that had been set. And I think we said July 16th.
July 16th.
And that's one of my daughter's birthdays. I don't know if maybe we were doing something for her on her. I don't know. But this had been going. No wonder my battery hadn't been charging the way it was supposed to here in a while. So I'm going to hit reset here. And I'm going to give you 1 minute, Anthony, on these players. And then we'll probably follow up on most of them. And we'll start with Darius Acuff. He's the National Player of the Week, at least from the Naismith Award this week. SEC Freshman of the Week for the 4th week in a row. There are a lot of good freshmen in college basketball. We saw Cameron Boozer at Duke, AJ, how do you say his last name at
DeBanza.
BYU? Okay, there you go. At BYU. A lot of people think that this is one of the better freshman classes that college basketball's had in a while. And I think Darius stands out in this class. What have you seen from him? You got a minute.
I mean, he's just he's good at everything, right? I mean, he can shoot, he can pass. He's really good, dribbling, driving to the basket. He's a good on-ball defender. He doesn't get a ton of steals, but he's affecting the plays on defense, and people don't really get around him all that much. And I mean, you look at just how much he's utilized. I mean, his offensive rating is really high. He takes, a quarter of Arkansas's shots. It's just, it's almost like, I mean, you can't say enough about him. I don't know that a minute is going to be enough time to just talk about everything he does well, because he does just about everything well. And, I think he's exceeded, a lot of people's expectations, and, mine included. And I had extremely high expectations for him coming into the season. He's been stellar. His assist rate is one of the best in the country. And, obviously it seems like everything Arkansas does runs through him. So it's just been incredibly impressive to see what he's done.
You talked to Tyler Ulis about him yesterday. Tyler, obviously great point guard for Calipari at Kentucky. What were some of the feedback that you got from him about Darius and maybe the growth that he's had since they've gotten him here?
Yeah, so a lot of the growth, it seems like, from Tyler Ulis's perspective has come from, I guess, the mentality side of it, being, always locked in on defense. Because a lot of the times, when these guys are playing high school ball, I mean, they're, obviously going to be the best player on the floor every game they play. So, sometimes that, isn't necessarily a challenge, but that's been something they've talked a lot. John Calipari, Tyler Ulis brought it up about body language and how that's been a big focal point for them. Because I mean, he came in with all of this talent already, right? So it's for them. It's really been about making sure that the mentality and everything else is there, and it certainly seems as though it has been. But Tyler Ulis was incredibly complimentary of Darius. He didn't want to take any of the credit for Darius's development. And, which, I mean, I know obviously he's, Darius has worked with Tyler Ulis quite a bit. And so I do think he deserves some credit for what's going on, Tyler Eulis, but he was very, very complimentary of what Darius has done and working with him.
One thing we haven't seen with Darius is what we did see with Malik Thomas for about 2 or 3 games, which was a little bit of a downturn in production, which is expected from anybody, but especially from a freshman. With Malik, I'll start with this. I thought that he was going to potentially win SEC Freshman of the Week this week because he had the big game against JMU, 28 points. And then I thought he was – Darius certainly was the player of the game against Tennessee, but I thought Malik was almost as impactful as he was. Some of those shots – I thought the 4-point play that he had was maybe the play of the game because it was kind of at that point where it felt like, hey, is Tennessee getting a little bit of an upper hand here? And then he makes that shot, makes the free throw, and it was one of those series of just and one plays that it just felt like kept Arkansas's confidence high, because Tennessee wasn't able to pull too far ahead. With Malik, what have you seen from him?
Yeah, and you mentioned the I guess the slump, the shooting slump that he had, but even when he had that shooting slump, he was still doing things that was affecting the play. He was still doing things that affected winning. I believe he had 7 assists in one of those games, or 6 assists in one of those games. I think he had 7 rebounds in another one of those games. So even when his shot isn't falling, he's still doing things that are affecting the play. He's an active defender as well, a bit like Darius Acuff. But I think the big thing with him is, where Darius Acuff doesn't necessarily get the steals that maybe he, I don't want to say should, because obviously I do think he's playing well on that side of the ball. Malik Thomas, is, he's averaging, or he has a 2.9% steal percentage, which I believe is in the top quarter of the country. He doesn't turn the ball over when when he has the ball. He's top 100 in turnover rate. He gets to the line. He shoots 85% from the free throw line. He does, a little bit like Darius Acuff. He does everything that you need him to do in order to affect winning. And him having that game against Tennessee was I think huge because he came into that game shooting 33% from the field against power conference teams, and I think him just having that performance was huge. Not that he wasn't playing well otherwise, because like we mentioned, obviously he's doing things that are affecting winning, but I think from a shooting perspective, that was a big deal. I went long.
No, you did. That's all right. We'll cut 30 seconds off of Malik Ewan. What I think he'd be the 6th man of the year in the SEC if that vote was taken today. Now, there's a lot of basketball between now and the tournament. I wonder how long Arkansas can keep him in that 6-man role, because if you'll notice, JMU, it wasn't real pretty at the start. Tennessee certainly wasn't real pretty at the start. They got him in, and I know he didn't score those first 7 points, but he was on the floor, and I think that impacts what Darius Acuff can do. I wonder – I don't think they're at a point where they're going to take him off the bench just yet, but I wonder if there's going to be a game where it just doesn't start well, and then you just kind of run out of time at the end, where that forces their hand, and they may have to make that change.
Yeah, it's an interesting, I guess, thought experiment. I don't know if that's the right way to put it.
Because the team is so much better when he's on the floor.
Yeah. Yeah, you look at the games that he started. There were Central Arkansas and Samford, so it's maybe a little bit of a grain of salt when you look at those numbers. But he played well in both of those. It wasn't necessarily super efficient from the field against Central Arkansas, but against Samford, he I believe 17 points in both those games, and so there's precedent, I guess, is the right way to put it. For him, whether or not they want to keep him, in that 6-man role, I'm not sure. Just because he's been extremely effective in that, and a lot of times you need that kind of a boost coming off the bench, especially if things don't start well. So, I could see it going either way, but yeah, it's he's good. Yeah, they're all good.
Trevin Brazile. You look at him. I didn't think he played a bad game against Tennessee. Now the numbers weren't great. What do you have? 4 rebounds. Had a blocked shot. He scored some points. He got open looks for 3. They just weren't falling that day,
yeah.
and that happens sometimes. There does seem to be a little bit of a streakiness to his game though, where what was it, back to back? He had Houston and was it Queens, where I think he went 26, and he had 2 big games back to back. Or Texas Tech. I'm sorry, Texas Tech.
Texas Tech and Queens.
Yeah, Texas Tech and Queens. And so, but there's a streakiness there. Since the Queens game, I don't know that he's had as many points in the last 3 games as he had in that one game. What have you thought about him, and how do you think that he overcomes the streakiness, or does he? Is that just who he is? I mean, that's kind of what his career's been.
Yeah, I think you take that with it. I mean, you look at how he has played. I think that is just something that is, something that you take, because he affects the game. I think especially on the defensive end. Obviously he's a long guy who can disrupt shots, get steals, and everything along those lines. But then offensively, he's potentially one of, if not the best athlete on the team. So he's he had the 2 putback dunks against Tennessee that
big plays.
Really huge plays, especially for the momentum in those I guess times in the game. So he's very capable of doing that. And when he and Darius Acuff are playing off each other to the level that we've seen and we know that they can, it's in my eyes one of the best 1-2 combos in the country. And just because we've seen it. There was this time when when those 2 guys were on the court together, Arkansas's offense was in the 99th percentile of the country, which is really good. So yeah, I think you just kind of take that as it comes, and because he does so much on both sides of the floor.
I don't want to shortchange him. He did have 7 rebounds against Tennessee, and I was right. By the way, he had 26 points against Queens. The last 3 games against Tennessee, JMU, and Houston, he's got a combined 20 points.
I once dropped 40 in a family basketball game.
Is that right?
Yeah. My brother couldn't guard me.
The points.
That was completely
I feel like
pointless to say. I just had to throw it out there.
They beat Tennessee without him having a big offensive game. Certainly those 2 putback dunks, like we said, those were really one of them was both of them were in the first half, but it just, again, they felt like kind of pivotal plays that helped Arkansas from a momentum standpoint. I do wonder if they're going to be able to beat some of the better teams that are on their schedule this year, though, if he's not playing at a higher level offensively than what we've seen these last 3 games.
Yeah, it's a good question, but I think again it kind of comes back to his work. I think defensively, I think he affects the game in so many different ways on the defensive end. So he's in I think it's the 92nd percentile in steal percentage and the 80th percentile in blocking percentage. So he affects the game in so many ways on that end of the floor. And that obviously you're not going to be, or at least I don't know of anybody who keeps track of just how many shots that he's disrupting, where he's not getting the block, but the guy misses the shot because he's got all 6'10" of Trevor Brazil in his face. So it's yeah, I think you just kind of take it as it comes because of how effective he is on the other end of the floor. If he's being a little streaky on the offensive end, and obviously we've seen how good he can be on the offensive end as well.
Okay, I want to talk about these 2 guys who John Calipari says told on themselves on Saturday. We'll start with Carter Knox, and it started kind of sluggish for him. There have been a couple of games where what was it, after Michigan State, he came back and started red hot in their next game. But again, it's kind of like Brazil. It's been a little bit streaky with him. I was really impressed, though, against Tennessee with the effort, that he showed. It wasn't just the rebounding. It was just some of the timeliness of the things he did. Missed shot by Acuff, rebounded, put it up for it's one of those and one plays that we talked about. And, big block shot during the game. And they like the effort. I know that they've seen from him. Where do you see, what do you see his role on this team being? Because I think that maybe some people thought he was going to be more of a scorer than he's ended up being. But certainly there's a lot of value. And I would say with him and Ewan, maybe it's easy to look at offensive numbers sometimes and not think about their impact on the other end of the floor and the points that they're taking away. Let's start with Carter Knox.
Yeah. So did you start the timer?
I will. Go ahead.
Okay.
I'm counting in my head.
Yeah, I think it's a little similar to Trevor Brazil, in which you kind of take some of the streakiness, and I think that we still are going to see Carter Knox's best basketball to come this season. He's shooting 43% from the 3-point line so far this season, which is I think it's an 8% increase from what he finished last season. Obviously, the volume isn't what it was at the end of last season just yet, because he took 100 threes last year. He's at 41 right now, but I think you can see it. His defensive rebounding is top quarter in the country, if I'm not mistaken. So I mean, he's active on that end of the floor, and I thought he was really good defensively against Tennessee for the most part. And yeah, I think maybe I think him. I don't want to say 3-and-D is his game, because I think he's so much more than that. But I think he can be that. I think he can be a guy who is really good at driving to the basket, because I think obviously we've seen that. So he's a guy who I'm trying to think of the right way to put it, but he's someone who I think there's still more to come. Especially with how big and how hyped up he was coming into the season, obviously coming back from testing the NBA draft waters and all of that. So I still certainly think there's still more to come from him this year.
I thought he played some of his best basketball at the end of last year.
Oh yeah,
and maybe that's just the kind of guy he is. Maybe he just steps up when the moments are bigger.
He gets brighter when the lights are on, I guess.
Say that again.
Gets brighter when the lights are on.
Well, you think about Texas Tech. He had 20 points. That's probably his best game of the year, and that's certainly one of the most high-profile games.
He was obviously he was very excited for that one, because he going into that game, he had talked about how Arkansas. He felt like Arkansas would have won a national title if Arkansas had gotten past Texas Tech. I don't know that I agree. I don't think anybody was touching Florida, except for Houston, because Houston obviously almost did it. But I mean, he wanted that game real bad, and he played extraordinarily well. And I know sometimes, or I think he got a little overshadowed in that game by Trevin Brazile and Darius Acuff, but I thought he was phenomenal in that game. So, and then obviously he played really well against Tennessee. So, I like you mentioned, he played his best basketball at the end of last season. So maybe that's where it's coming along.
Malik Ewan, some people, I think, questioned the effort early in the year. I think he's been dealing with some stuff. He had a wrap around his thumb at one point. I think
he had a shoulder injury over the summer as well.
I think they said that he was playing with a little bit of an illness during one of the games here in the last 2 or 3 weeks. But I don't think, really beginning with the Houston game, and maybe going back before that a game or two as well, but Houston was really the game where it stood out. It's like, whoa, okay, now I can kind of see – you could see the potential more, I thought, in that game than you could in some of the previous games with him.
I got more out of the 20 points he had against Houston than I did the 21 he got against Jackson State.
There you go. He struggled with foul trouble early in the year, and I think he's done a better job of keeping himself out of foul trouble. But man, I mean, it reminds me a little bit, and I understand that the scenarios or the situations are different, but it reminds me a little bit of Jonas Adu this time or last year, where it was so slow starting, and you're wondering like who's going to be that guy that's a force for them in the post. And I would say that if Ewan continues to play the way that he has the last 3 or 4 games or so, then you feel really good about their post play.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think I go back to the Louisville game as kind of where I kind of, I guess, draw that line of like, okay, here's Malik Ewan and everything he can be, because after that game, John Calipari had mentioned that he had shown his Florida State tape of against Louisville to him and the whole team, and tried to get him going in that way, because he played really well against Louisville in both those
12
games.
points, 9 rebounds this year against them.
Yes, yeah. So, and he played well in that game, and ever since then, obviously, there's the game against Queens is kind of a wash, because I think that's the game he was playing, I guess, with a little bit of an illness, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, he only played 9 minutes that day.
That game against Houston, he was phenomenal. I know he had the missed free throws, but ever since then,
but he was an 81% free throw shooter going in. That was just and he's
kind of an anomaly.
And he was 8 for 8 the other day against Tennessee. Yeah, so he's obviously a good free throw shooter. He just was having a bad day, which happens.
Yeah. So I think he's like 13 of 16 since then, and against James Madison and Tennessee. So I think you're really starting to see the Malik Ewan that they thought they were going to get. In which obviously this is the time where you really want guys to be not playing their best, because you obviously you want everybody to be playing their best at in March, but this is a time where you really want to see everything kind of coming together, and I think you're really starting to see that come I guess, to fruition. I mean, he's shooting 61% from the field. Obviously most of that is going to be coming around the basket. I think his blocking percentage has been near top 100, if I'm not mistaken. So he's up there. His rebounding has gotten, I think, a lot better in recent games. And I think, there's a lot to like there. I think, with his athleticism, the way he can kind of move a little bit like a guard, despite, being, as big as he is, I think that will make him, a matchup problem for a lot of SEC teams, and, make him a guy who can, stack up and guard against, some of the, I guess, other matchup problems in the SEC. I mean, especially when you look at, the game coming up tomorrow against, Ole Miss with Malik Dia, who obviously caused Arkansas a lot of problems last year. So, yeah, I probably went long, so that's my bad.
On the blocks with Ewan, he didn't have more than one block until the Fresno State game on December 6th. Since then, he's got multiple blocks in 4 of their last 6 games. It seems like the rim protection has really improved on his part.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I mean, yeah. I think that, like I said, I think we're starting to see, Arkansas getting the best out of Malik Ewan, and I think that's huge when you go into conference play. Obviously, they've got, Ole Miss and Auburn coming up, and those are 2 teams that like to play inside or like to get inside, and and I know Auburn can obviously play on the perimeter as well, but yeah, that's you want him to be playing like this, coming to this stage of the season.
DJ Wagner, I want to say one thing on him. He only scored 2 points against Tennessee. I thought something that was so undervalued, though, for him during that game is that Darius Acuff goes out of the game with Arkansas at 59-58 with about 8:40 left. When he comes back into the game with 5:29 to play,
he's the steady
it's
hand.
68-61. Wagner was running point the entire time, so they actually increased their lead by 6 points with Acuff on the bench. And I thought that was one of the more underappreciated things that we saw from DJ on Saturday. He seems like he's that type where maybe the offensive numbers aren't where you want them with him, but it still feels like when he's on the floor, you're getting kind of the best version of this team. Like if you need him to run point, he's going to do that. If you need him to be that off guard, and maybe that just opens some things up for Acuff and Thomas, that's working out well too. I don't think Wagner's playing poorly this year. I just think that, with the addition of these 2 dynamic freshmen that they have, that his role's really changed.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that, for sure. And I think he's shooting a career best from the 3-point line. I think he's hovering around 40%. I think a little bit below. But I think he obviously everybody knows that DJ Wagner is he's a guy who's going to play hard defense. He likes to be in your face, and he likes to get deflections and everything like that. And he doesn't foul whenever he's playing hard defense either. Like he's a good defender without fouling. He doesn't turn the ball over either. So whenever he has to step into being the point guard, whenever like happened against Tennessee, if Darius Acuff has to go out, he can step into that role, and you're not gonna turn the ball over. So that's not really a huge concern. And I think like you said, I don't think that the offensive numbers are staggering by any means, but I think that was always going to happen when you brought in Darius Acuff and Malik Thomas, and kind of needed to shift DJ Wagner into a more off-ball role. And I think that's something that he's fully embraced, and I think that he's doing relatively well. I still think that you would want to get more production out of him in terms of points and assists and everything like that, but I still think that he's doing what he needs to do, I guess. I think he's somebody who's fully bought into his role, and he's doing what needs to be done, I guess.
Well, and knock on wood or whatever superstition you have, but if something were to happen to one of these other guards, like what happened to Boogie Fland about this time last year, you have this guy who can step in and you've got comfort and confidence in what he can do for you. And maybe it's not an injury. Maybe it's just they're in a slump. Maybe they're in foul trouble that night. I still feel like there's going to be a game this year where DJ Wagner – you're going to look up and maybe he's got 15, 17, 18 points, and he's going to be the star of the game that you say, hey, you wouldn't have beaten whoever without the performance that you had from him.
Yeah, no, and I think that I think John Calipari also believes that because he always talks about how DJ Wagner, affects the game, even if he doesn't have, a great shooting night or if he doesn't have a ton of points. He always likes to bring up how DJ Wagner has, he affected the game against, I'm trying to remember which game he was talking about. I think it may have been like, I don't remember if Samford, I think it was Winthrop or Samford, one of the two, when they were really kind of
10
leaning
points
on,
against Samford.
Yeah, they were really leaning on their more experienced guys when two teams that frankly you should have put away way earlier.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, are still hanging around. They were really hanging on to DJ and Trevin Brazil and all those guys to get over the line in those games. And if you don't have those performances, even if they're not the most eye popping scoring numbers, maybe we're having a completely different conversation about where the season is because maybe they drop one or both of those games. So I still, despite there not being like a huge, offensive output night from DJ Wagner to this point, I still think he's been an important part of the success that the team has had so far. And I just think he's a guy who is like fully bought into his role and doing what he needs to do, whether that is the scoring or whether that's being the off-ball guard who is, creating space or doing, whatever he needs to do. But yeah, I do think that there's going to come a point where he does have, a big scoring night at some point.
What about Nick Pringle? This has been kind of the more interesting player, I think, for the last month or so. I'll fully admit, the first 4 or 5 games of the year probably set a different expectation that I had for him, probably because I wasn't as familiar with just his background. Mm-hmm. But, he scored 8, 6, 9, didn't score against Samford, then he scored 13 against Winthrop. And, I mean, he was the go-to guy down the stretch against Winthrop. They don't beat Winthrop probably without the last minute and a half they had from him offensively. He's not an offensive guy, though. I think that has become very evident in the last 10 games or so. But defensively and rebounding, he's got to be able to stay out of foul trouble in order to impact those areas. Against Tennessee, he wasn't able to. There have been some other games this year. Duke is one that I think of where he fouled out, where he just hasn't been able to stay.
Michigan State as well.
Yeah, he hadn't been able to stay on the court very much. So what do you see from him right now, and maybe how it can improve?
Yeah, no, he's never really been the biggest offensive threat. As a big man, he's always been the guy you go to when you need rebounds. He's always been a pretty solid rebounder, but I think you're still kind of waiting to see that because he has gotten into some foul trouble in some of these games, which was always. I don't want to say
4
always,
fouls in
but
13 minutes and one rebound against Tennessee.
Yeah, not ideal, but I think he's a guy who you didn't bring him in for the points he's going to score. You bring him in for the defense and the rebounding, and I still think that's a little to be seen. His defensive rebounding rate is good. I think he's top 5th, top quarter of the country in defensive rebounding, maybe top 3rd if I'm not mistaken. But and once they get the ball inside to him on the offensive end, he's scoring at a decent rate. I think he's shooting right around 70% at the rim, which I think you still want it to be a little bit higher, but still, I mean, it's not like it's a terrible clip. But yeah, I think if you can keep him out of foul trouble, which has been a problem obviously this season, and has kind of been at different points in his career as well, I think you can still get a lot out of him. Obviously, he was a huge part of the Alabama Final Four team, and he's been around for forever. So he's a guy who I think you can still rely on in important moments, but you need to clean up the foul trouble because he's got 4.6 fouls per 40 minutes, which is a lot.
Sometimes I just feel like his fouls are. I'm trying to think how to say this. You don't have to foul. Mm-hmm. And you like the other day, guy takes off trying to dunk it from the SEC logo in the lane, and Pringle, instead of maybe trying to take a charge, he goes up and
goes up for the block
and tries to go for a Superman block, and it's just you're sitting there kind of wondering, it's like, man, like there's a higher percentage play that you can make here.
Yeah, no, for sure. So I think if
how many charges has Arkansas taken this year?
I couldn't tell you, to be honest with
it's
you.
not a big number.
It's not a lot. That's
one thing that stands out is that there
And
just
they
haven't
have
been a lot of
changed like kind
charges.
of the block charge rule
Right,
to where
right.
it's not as prevalent anymore. So I think that might be part of it. So maybe that is affecting things. And if we're noticing all of this, I can promise you, I think coaches are too. So.
Was it JP Estrella? Was that who took off
I
trying to
believe
dunk
it
it there?
was, yeah.
You could have got a charge on that one. like that was the most
No,
ready-made.
I'm getting the block.
That was the most ready-made charge of the entire season. And then finally, number 8, last but certainly not least, is Billy Richmond, who he's my favorite player to watch on this team, just because of the energy he brings. And you look at what he's done in the most important, I shouldn't say the most important games, but in the most high-profile games they played this year. And this is for, a role player. 8 points against Michigan State, 11 against Duke, 10 against Louisville, 6 against Texas Tech, 12 against Houston, 5 the other day against Tennessee. He was in foul trouble, and his minutes were cut because of Carter Knox. And I'll just say, one of the fouls that he got was just total.
It was very bad.
BS.
I remember
It was,
the exact foul you're talking about.
I mean,
it was not a good call.
And then kind of to underscore the fact that I feel like the people who are in game day operations at Bud Walton need a better feel for the game. They go from that, and I mean, the crowd is furious. They're livid. And then the next thing you know, they're doing this. And I'm
was
not
that
saying
when
this
they
is
did the really bad, like, the,
no, that's when no. That's when they did the and I don't want to sound insensitive to this, but that's when they did the Arkansas Children's Northwest promotion where they bring out a cancer survivor, which is a great promotion.
it is. It's like one of my favorite times of the entire game.
At that point in the game, it changed the dynamic in the arena in such a weird way where it was like everybody was furious and the place could have really been rocking by the time the game. I don't know. It's just, and I try to delicately
I don't know
talk
if they
about
have
that,
like the.
but
I don't know if that.
it's
that
almost
has to
at a
happen
point
at a specific time.
the game is on a
Close
script.
of attention to
The
it.
game's
yeah.
on a script. Maybe don't script things in the second half. Like seriously, don't script things in the second half when like the emotions are going to be the highest in the arena.
Yeah.
Just a thought. Go ahead, Billy Richmond though.
I was
thoughts
going
on
to say I was thinking you were talking about when there was like the really interesting hotel room service YMCA
I missed that
matchup.
one.
I couldn't believe I didn't
Oh,
even
is this
know.
from the DJ?
I think so.
Okay.
Either that or it was some sort of like mashup that they just kind of played.
I've gotten,
and I was like,
I've gotten to the point that I put my AirPods in. It's so loud in there. I
I
put my
didn't-
AirPods in during the timeouts.
I didn't know that a YMCA hotel room service mashup was
Well,
legal.
let me tell you what. They matched up George Strait, write this down, with AC/DC the other day. And I love George Strait and I love AC/DC. Those are two things. It's kind of like
They're very different.
I like cheeseburgers and I like spaghetti. I'm not mixing those two things together. But we were talking about Billy Richmond. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, he's obviously he's the effort player, right? I mean, he's a guy who's always going to be going 110 miles per hour, and I think you've seen some genuine growth in his game. I mean, you look at his assist numbers. He had 6 assists against James Madison to match a career best. He's not a guy who's going to go out and get a ton of assists, but he's somebody who's very capable of it. I mean, if you remember last season, they were running him as a bit of a backup point guard at times when Boogie Flam went down. So there are times where he can, have those moments where he's going to find a really nice pass and create an open look for somebody because he's so dangerous driving to the basket. And, he's not a lethal three-point shooter by any means, but you can definitely tell he's much better than he was. I mean, last season he took a total of 16 threes and made 2. This season he's taken 23 and made 7, which, it's still, hovering around 30%, which isn't a great mark, but it's, absolutely an improvement. And it's something that you like to see that when you have guys who are very clearly improving. And I think, his ability as a ball handler is still really good. His passing is like we mentioned, really good, and his offensive rating has gone up in general. So, I think he is obviously he's going to be a lot of people's favorite players to watch, just because he doesn't go half in on anything. He goes all in on every play.
High energy.
It's
amazing.
Yeah, which he's a lot of fun
the team
to watch,
feeds off
and I
that.
think absolutely yeah. And when you pair that with, I think the offensive improvement that you've seen, because he's always been a guy who you can sub him in and you can have him guard the other team's best player, and he's going to be very effective in that role. I think when you look at the offensive improvements he's made, even if he's not going out and dropping 30 every night, I think that is encouraging for him. Yeah.
We're going to talk more about Arkansas basketball, the Ole Miss game tomorrow night. First, a word from Kendall King.
Kendall King, we're proud of over 4 decades of design. We're continuing the legacy of great creative design by combining our brands of Kendall King, Soapbox, and Shopcart. Together, these brands represent a new focus in marketing design with individual attention to specific areas. Through our design expertise supported by a team of talented professionals, we showcase our best. We are Kendall King, we are Soapbox, we are Shopcart, we are design.
Hey, welcome back. I want to tell you about Bentonville Glass. They've been serving their community since 1971. They're committed, professional, and versatile. Come by and see them now at 507 South Main in Bentonville or online at bentonvilleglass.com. Arkansas and Ole Miss tomorrow night, 8 o'clock tip-off. It's going to be on SEC Network. Anthony's going to be in Oxford tomorrow.
It'll be my 51st individual arena I've covered a game in.
You've got to count.
I do. I keep a full list. I do count non-D1s. As long as it's college basketball, I put it on the list. There are 2 NAIA arenas on here. At Columbia College up in Columbia, Missouri. And
Bill George Arena.
Bill George Arena, yeah.
You went to the toilet paper game.
I did. That was so fun. But yeah, this will be number 51 for me.
So Ole Miss.
Very fun.
Ole Miss is 8-6, 0-1 in the SEC. Certainly not the type of team that we're used to seeing from Chris Beard. They got it handed to him pretty good over at OU on opening night. I think 86-70 was the final score. What do you see from them, and what do you think about this matchup tomorrow? Yeah,
it's strange, I guess. They've got a lot of new pieces. They lost a lot, but they also they returned some key guys. Obviously, Malik Diaz, the guy who stands out, but I mean, it's not like he's alone. They bring in a guy like AJ Storr who. I know a lot of people weren't impressed with his work at Kansas last year, and I know obviously you expect more from a guy like him, and everything that he's done at the college level. But I mean, it wasn't like he was like a bona fide scrub at Kansas. I mean, he wasn't great by any means, but he was playing off the bench and contributing at times. So I mean, it wasn't like he was terrible. You just expect more from him, and I think that's kind of the theme of this Ole Miss team. When you look at it on paper, is you expect more. I mean, they've got one top 100 KenPom win, and that was against a pretty bad Memphis team. I think we can say that now because that Memphis team has not performed well, to this point of the season, and then they're winless against power conference teams. And I know Memphis is kind of power conference adjacent, but it's still in the American. And then you look at every team that they've played against in on the power conference level. They've lost to Iowa. They've lost to a really bad Utah team. They lost to Miami, Florida, who's decent. St. John's, who has been pretty disappointing. Not pretty, very disappointing. NC State, who's also been pretty disappointing. And then obviously they kind of got it handed to them against Oklahoma. So it's a weird team. You expected more, I think, is the theme. I don't know that you expected a Sweet 16 team like they had last season, but I still think you expected them to be better than what they are.
I wonder how hostile, if at all, it's going to be there. Couple 3 things to think of. Number one, they're 8-6, so certainly the enthusiasm level about the basketball team's not where it is. Mm-hmm. You got the football team still playing. They're going to be playing in the Fiesta Bowl here in the next few days.
That's the next night, right?
Next night or the night after, one or the other. So you've got that, and then classes don't start in Oxford for like another 2 weeks, and so you're probably not going to have a big student presence there. That can go one of 2 ways. Here's where I'm going with this. This can go one of 2 ways. It's either one of those things where you're going to have to go in there and you kind of have to make your own energy, or if you don't, and make your own energy, and maybe you just take whatever of the home crowd is there out of it, or if you don't make your own energy, it can turn into one of those really sluggish games where you're looking up with 4 or 5 minutes left in the game, and it's this is a lot different than maybe you think it should be. I think Arkansas is going to be a big favorite in this game. I haven't seen a betting line on the game yet.
I don't think there's.
But I would assume Arkansas is going to be, I would say, probably 4 points or more favorite to win this game. Maybe it's quite a bit more. I don't know. So the point being that the crowd is not maybe going to be the same type of crowd that they've been used to playing in when they go out of Fayetteville.
Yeah, I don't know what to expect from that perspective. I can't believe it's 2 weeks.
Now it's not a big arena to fill there.
I know it's got it's like 9,500. I think
big.
is the seating there, but 2 weeks.
Yeah,
That's a
looking at it
long
here,
break.
January 20th, classes begin for the spring semester.
That's
at the University of
a
Mississippi.
crazy long break. I don't think is that like a full month?
It says here that well, I don't know. I don't have their calendar for
That's kind
fall.
of crazy. If they got a full month off for
I would guess it's probably
Christmas
more than
and New Year's,
more than a month.
that's wild to me. We never got that.
So yeah,
I'm
January 20th.
I'm gonna be sending an email to the University of Missouri asking for my time back.
Here's something you and I talked about is how Arkansas has played all these really good defensive teams this year.
Mm-hmm.
What did we say? 4 of the top 16 in defensive efficiency according to Ken Palm, and they scored 86 against Tennessee. They scored 85 against Houston. Now that was they didn't play defense well in that game at all. Duke, I think they scored 71. Michigan State, they scored 66. Even if you wanted to throw this team in there, I know the game didn't count and it's an exhibition, but Cincinnati's one of the top 16 defensive teams too. They at least saw them. You know, they put themselves, matched themselves up against Cincinnati on the same floor. Their offensive numbers are really good. You and I were talking about this too, how these are probably the best offensive numbers they've had since the glory years, like 94, 95. And, they're doing it against some pretty good defensive teams. Beard's teams are known to be
tough defense,
hard-nosed defensive teams.
They like to slow you down.
Are they able to do that this year? Is that their limitation, or is their limitation just their offense?
It's a little bit of both. They're not as good as you expect a Chris Beard defensive team to be. Like, I mean, you look at last season's defensive team was number 23 in the country. This season it's 58. His first year was 141. That was kind of a wash because it was his first year and it was kind of a tough situation. Obviously, his Texas team finished 14th in defensive efficiency, but he wasn't the coach there for most of that season. But he did build the roster. But that was obviously most of the season came after he was fired following his arrest, and we don't need to get into all those details. But then you look at his Texas Tech teams. I mean, 18, 9, 1, 4. They've always been good. His Little Rock team was number 33. So you expect good defenses, and it's not like this defense is terrible by any means. Like I mean, you give up 86 to an Oklahoma team I'm not super high on. It's like, but I mean, they're number 58 in the country in defensive efficiency, which isn't like. It's not like a ghastly number. It's just not really what you don't think of the 58th best defense and associate that with a Chris Beard team. And then the offense has been pretty bad. Like you expect more on both ends, and I think that's kind of the theme of this Ole Miss season is you expected more, and you just haven't gotten it. Against teams of equal to or better quality than this Ole Miss team is on paper, and it's been a lot of when does it turn on? When does that switch get flipped? And to this point, it just hasn't happened. But they still slow you down. They just haven't been able to fully stop you.
It's not a typical Chris Beard team. AP poll came out yesterday. 5 SEC teams in it. Vanderbilt's 11, Alabama's 13, Arkansas's 15, Georgia 18, and Tennessee 21. Surprised at all by the 5 SEC teams? Any others that you think should be in?
No.
You want to elaborate?
No. Those are the only ones that I had on my ballot, and those are the only ones I considered voting for. Yeah. Like and Georgia, I'm still not fully convinced about because Georgia's non-conference schedule was ghastly, Georgia's to be fair to Georgia, Georgia's looked really good. I think
Georgia beat Auburn.
Yeah,
they beat them.
I don't think Auburn's very good.
But
to be honest with you, I think Auburn
talented.
Will be a tournament team. They are talented, But Georgia, had a 4-point lead with. I don't remember exactly how much time left. It should have been enough time to see out a 4-point lead. but Auburn came back and tied it, and they had to win it in overtime. But, I mean, to their credit, they still won. Georgia, I think, is the best scoring offense in the country. Some of that is down to, like I said, the non-conference schedule was really bad. But, I mean, they've won their games. They've done what they've needed to do. So I keep Georgia in my ballot for now. They've got, I don't remember who they've got this week, but, they've got some tough games. I know that. So it'll be interesting to see how Georgia stacks up against
Go to Florida.
Which Florida also, the interesting team. Losing to my alma mater and losing to I don't think Mizzou is very good this year. First time they've been healthy this year, for fully healthy, but I still am not convinced that Mizzou team is any good. And yeah, it's been weird. But anyway, Georgia has played well to this point. I want to see it against fully good teams.
We had a conversation about a month ago here, and I asked you what you thought the SEC hierarchy looked like at that time. Has it changed?
I guess so. Because I think you have to have Georgia in there just because of the analytic numbers and everything. But I still think that the top three is pretty clearly Vanderbilt, Arkansas, Alabama in some order. Vanderbilt plays Alabama, I think, this week, so we're going to get a lot of answers about that. It's going to be Vanderbilt's biggest game of the season, which, Vanderbilt still, I know people keep talking about how Vanderbilt hasn't played, ranked teams. Now they have 2 ranked wins because they beat SMU and UCF, who are now both in the top 25. But also they have 7 top 100 KenPom wins, which is the most in the SEC, I think, by a pretty healthy distance. So, I mean, that Vanderbilt team is real. I'm very excited to see how they do on the road at Alabama, or at least I think that's a road game. I could be wrong. But, yeah, I do think, as things stand, I think that is your pretty clear top 3. And then the rest, I think Tennessee, I still think is better than Georgia, though I had Tennessee below Georgia in my ballot this week just because Georgia, won its game, Tennessee lost its game, and there was some other teams that had won that I moved up and everything like that. But yeah, and then after that it's Georgia, Florida, Kentucky, whoever you want to put in that, I guess, kind of hodgepodge of middle teams, and it's an interesting little, I guess, group there in the middle. Yeah.
If there's one team that's not ranked right now that could surprise people and challenge for the SEC,
I still think it's probably Florida because that front court is really good. Tommy Haug is, despite Florida's, I guess, limitations, he still looked like one of the best players in the league. So I still think that Florida team can put it together. I obviously that front court is phenomenal. They returned obviously Haug, Ruben Chinyelu and Alex Condon and even Micah Hanglogton. So I still think that team is the most well equipped to not just get back into the rankings and all of that, but also to challenge for titles and everything like that. And a lot of that is going to come down to Boogie Fland and Xavier Lee gelling and putting it together, because there have been, I think it's mostly when one plays well, the other doesn't. When those two play well together, I think that's when you're going to start to see Florida kind of.
Boogie's been taking a lot of heat for the late game stuff. It hadn't, we talked about a couple of the high profile games. He missed a shot the other night against Missouri at the buzzer. This just hasn't been real good for him. I did want to follow up on one thing I said yesterday, because I made a comment yesterday that I thought, 2-3 weeks left in the season, I think Arkansas is going to be in the mix for this conference title, unless somebody like Alabama just totally runs away with it and has a 17-1 type record, which I think that would surprise me. But I said I wonder what the correlation is between winning your first game of the conference season and winning the conference title. So I looked it up.
Ooh, okay.
The last outright champion. All right, let me start with this. The last champion of any kind that lost its conference opener and still won the SEC was a split title between Auburn and Tennessee. Tennessee lost its conference opener here at Arkansas in 2017-18. It was a game where Darryl Macon and Jalen Barford had a big game. I think Daniel Gafford had a big game that day too. So that was the last time that it happened. The last time an outright champion lost its first game, you have to go back to 2008-09. and LSU, coached by, I believe, Trent Johnson, of all people. They lost their first game, I believe, in overtime, and ended up winning the SEC. So there
How
is a
about
little bit of a
that?
correlation there between
Yeah.
starting 1-0 and going on to win the SEC. So
How about that?
if you're looking for a silver lining beyond just Arkansas beating Tennessee on Saturday, that might be one.
There you
It's
go.
been 32 years. 32 years since Arkansas won an SEC title.
I remember
I
it
knew
like
it'd
it
been
was
a while.
yesterday.
Well, I knew it had been a while.
That's not true.
I don't know that I knew it had been that long. But
I was
you
there.
start to think about it. You weren't. You start to think about it. It makes sense. So
Yeah.
all right, Anthony, appreciate you being here. You can read all of Anthony's work at wholehogsports.com. He's got a really good feature up on the site right now on Darius Acuff. Hope that we see you again on our show tomorrow or at our website, wholehogsports.com. Have a great day.